Hey there, Chris Cairns here, currently serving as an Army chaplain, but in a former life I was planting a church and helping other people plant churches as a network leader for the Anglican Mission. Now an Anglican Church of North America chaplain in the armed forces, and very proud to get to serve. I wanted to come on and talk a little bit about church planting. I think in Anglican circles it might be helpful if we start saying parish planting instead of church planting. And why do I say that? Let me unpack that a little bit. When we think of church, and even in some North American Church of England descended circles, when you think of church or parish, you think of about a 7-acre property and a physical plant. You also have certain pressures like Sunday morning worship and children's ministry and nursery and youth ministry, music ministry. So you have certain cultural expectations. If you call it a church or you call it a parish, you have these things. But that's really a reduction of what a parish is. A parish, in the truest sense of the etymology of the word, the breakdown of the word, is really about a geographical region. And so back in the old days, like where Anglicans or Catholics settled, the Church of England settled Jamaica. What do they call their counties? They call them parishes. In French Louisiana, where the Catholic Church settled, they call the geographic regions there, instead of counties, they call them parishes. And so within the parish structure, which is a geographical region, you would have certain expectations on the parish. Because it's a geographical region, if there are poor in your parish, they are your responsibility because of who we are as God's people. And so when you think of church planting, and your connotation is, well, what does the church up the street have? It has a gym and Christian yoga classes and group therapy for every imaginable category. None of which are inherently bad things, but it is a reduction of our thinking about worship and spiritual formation and community, both internal to the parish, and the fact that our community is supposed to bleed out over the walls of the church building into our parish, where there are people whose souls are dying for lack of the gospel. So it's a completely different way of thinking about church and parish, connoting the words differently than we have. We need to get back to our roots of Anglican parish planting, and then having perhaps deaneries where you have priorities of encouraging those parishes toward mission and outreach and pooling resources to do that, and then several deaneries within a diocese. Because of our reduction in the connotation of the word parish among Anglican church planters, we've often been focused on the wrong things first and the first things later. And a return to this idea of parishes may have multiple chapels with lay-led ministries, and the priest can't be at every place on Sunday. That's also one of the things that's interesting about the pre-1979 prayer book era, is you had a lot of lay-led ministries that did morning prayer on Sunday, and the priest would visit around to each of the chapels to do Eucharist, or the whole parish, like they do in Africa, would gather in an outside place if they didn't have a building big enough to do it. They would gather the whole parish outside. In Africa, East Africa, where I've visited, there are bishops who are bishops over 100,000 people. And they didn't do that by saying, okay, now we have 100,000 people, or we have a diocese, now we need 100,000 people. They had 100,000 people that became a diocese. And so we are not doing it like they're doing it. They have lay catechists leading chapels of various groups of families. And those families do, groups of families that gather in chapel have micro-lending capabilities where a family that's deserving gets a goat and it alters their economic trajectory for the next, the foreseeable future in micro-lending. So it's a much different way of thinking than we think. And I think there are some deficiencies in the way that we're currently thinking. If you go back to the way that Anglicans settled Manhattan Island, it was with chapels. And those chapels were part of Trinity Corporation. And Trinity Corporation moved from where it was Trinity Church, where it is now Trinity Church Wall Street. And then they eventually had a national headquarters, very expensive, at a place called 815. But all the way up to the 1970s, it was chapels, probably a little bit too long. And then the Episcopal Church gave those parishes, called those parishes, your parishes now, here's $1 million, you're responsible for all of your costs going forward. But going back to that root of planting chapels with lay-led ministries, where priests were priests of parishes that were much larger and more geographical than we have now. Now, because of the cultural expectation in our churches of Eucharist every Sunday, we have to have one very expensive priest for every group of Anglican people. And this has created a great deal of inertia to what could have been lay-led bodybuilding ministries, so that the number of people necessitated a priest rather than ordained people looking around for a group of people large enough to afford them. So that's created, there's probably not going to be a return to the previous cultural expectation because of the liturgical movement in the 20th century, but we can still do things to build the body, to develop leaders, to have lay catechists who may become deacons, may never become deacons, to have licensed lay readers who are theologically educated and do all sorts of training for us, who don't have to be ordained. And then to have deacons that are focused on parish and diocesan geographical priorities of mission and outreach, who are not just liturgical, serving in a liturgical role of deacon or serving internal to the community inside the walls of the church, but who are serving more comprehensively, more widely in mission and outreach in the geographical regions that Anglicans are supposed to be focused on. So that's just a thought. Maybe we should get back to our roots and start building community groups that could become chapels that could become church plants, and or locations, I should say, that might have one centralized administrative function at a parish to share costs and spread resources. So perhaps we should start talking about parish planting. Again, I'm just brainstorming here. Chris Cairns, serving as an active duty Army chaplain and serving as the assistant rector at St. Andrews in Huntsville, Alabama. I hope you enjoyed this. Love to get the conversation going, and keep the conversation going in the comments. Take care. God bless.